Why markets ignored Trump's tariffs and why that silence is the most dangerous signal. Introduction. When nothing happens. There are moments in history when chaos is obvious crashes, collapse, sirens, panics. And then there are moments when nothing happens no headline, screaming collapse, no red skin, no visible fear. The moments are far more dangerous. Those moments are far more dangerous. Because when power stops producing reaction, it means the system has already adjusted. Recently, the United States announced sweeping new tariffs on imports from 14 countries, such as 40%, even 50% in some cases, on Japan, South Korea, parts of Southeast Asia, threats extending towards Europe, even whispers of tariffs on copper, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals. In another era, this would have been market shaking, but this time, global markets barely reacted. Stocks dipped slightly, then recovered. Volatility stayed contained. Capital didn't flee. That silence is the story, not because tariffs don't matter, but because they no longer shock. The death of policy shock. Markets do not react to morality, they react to politics. They react to surprise and constraints. There was no surprise here. Tariffs are no longer a sudden weapon. They are a familiar threat deployed repeatedly, announced loudly, and delayed endlessly. Markets have learned the pattern: announcement, deadline, negotiation, partial retreat, exceptional lists, quiet dilution. When a threat follows a predictable rhythm, it loses its power. This is not resilience, this is desensitization, like a body that stops reacting to poison because it has been exposed too often. Markets indifference isn't confidence in the economy, it's confidence in its own ability to adapt faster than governments can act. Why equity stayed calm but bonds didn't? Equity markets shrugged, but bonds merely whispered. This distinction matters. Stocks are narrative, bonds are mathematics. While stock indices recovered quickly, government bond yields rose subtly, signaling concern about fiscal pressure, inflation, pass-through, and long-term cost of capital. Equities respond to stories. Bonds respond to burdens. This divergence tells us something crucial. Markets are not denying risk, they are relocating it. Short-term optimism on the surface, long-term stress underneath. This is how late stage systems behave. And here is the uncomfortable truth. Markets no longer depend on governments the way they once did. Capital today is mobile, modular, juristic, agnostic. Factories are no longer national monuments. Supply chains are no longer linear. Labor is no longer fixed to geography. When a state raises friction, capital doesn't protest, it moves. That single fact has quietly hollowed out the shock power of tariffs. States will still speak in borders, capital speaks in networks, and network always outrun borders. While Western markets stayed calm, Asia understood what was happening immediately, not emotionally, strategically. Chinese firms accelerated diversification into Southeast Asia. Asian economies absorbed new investment flows. India emerged as a structural hedge against concentrated Chinese exposure. This was not diplomatic balancing, this was industrial rerouting. And it happened quietly. No speeches, no declarations, just capital changing direction. And this is how power moves in the 21st century, not through confrontation, through redundancy and resilience. Part 4. Copper exposed the lie. If tariffs truly had no effect, commodities would have ignored them too. They didn't. When the US announced a 50% tariffs on copper import, copper prices in the United States surged immediately, over 10% in a single move. Why? Because copper is not narrative, it's a physical reality. Electronics, energy grids, defense manufacturing, electric vehicles, infrastructure. The United States imports a majority of its copper. Tariffs here don't hurt the foreign producers first. They raise domestic costs instantly. Markets ignore tariff headlines. Copper reacted because it cannot relocate. This distinction matters more than any shock indexes, pharmaceuticals, and the limit of blunt force. The, the threat of a 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals should have terrified markets, but it didn't. Why? Because pharmaceutical supply chains are too complex to intimidate with blunt force. Active ingredients come from multiple countries. Manufacturing is fragmented. Regulatory approval create inertia. Markets understood that such tariffs would hurt US customers, increase healthcare costs, trigger political backlash. So the threat was priced as leverage, not execution. Once again, the market judged credibility and discounted it. Central banks are far more concerned than markets appear. The Bank of England warned openly high tariffs could increase corporate defaults and bank losses. The ECB added security risks and investment restrictions into its financial stability outlook. Why the concern? Because tariffs do not collapse systems overnight. They strain leverage structures slowly. And the most leverage structured are not banks. They are non-bank financial institutions, shadow banking, hedge funds, private credit, highly leveraged funds operating with opacity. This sector holds hundreds of trillions in assets. It thrives in volatility. It breaks in prolonged uncertainty. When it breaks, it doesn't ring alarm, it cascades reality. You may ask why this silence is worse than panic. Panic is visible, it invites response. Silence is lethal. When markets stop reacting, it means risk has been absorbed, shock has been normalized, and authority has decayed. The system isn't stable, it is adaptive, and adaptive systems do not wait for permission. They root around obstacles. Government Governments announce, markets migrate. This is the new hierarchy. Tariff were once weapon, now they are signals, and signals without surprise lose meaning. Power today doesn't belong to the loudest state. It belongs to whoever controls logistics, capital mobility, supply chain optionality, and time. The state still has force, but force without precision produces diminishing returns. Markets are not defying governments, they are outgrowing them. The most dangerous moment in history is not when it is attacked, it is when attacks stop working. Markets ignore tariffs, not because nothing changed, but because everything already had. Capital has learned to move faster than policy, supply chains have learned to fragment, risk has learned to hide, and silence, not panic, is the warning. Because when power stops producing reaction, it means the center no longer holds the leverage it thinks it does. By the time the consequences arrive, the capital will already be gone.